Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Continuing with the top 100 players list. So basically what I've been doing, or I've done one video so far, going through the players list and then offering my critique of that and offering up my alternative list, discussing why I think those players deserved it and the spots that they're in. So we'll hop right in. If you've not seen players 100 through 91, I recommend hunting that down and checking that one out. So, beginning with the players list, player 90 on their list was Malcolm Jenkins, the safety for the Eagles. He has not made my list. I do think he's one of the top safeties in the league at the moment. Certainly one of those that was close, plays every facet of the game to a pretty high standard. I could make an argument he probably should have made it on over some of the injured players I put on, like Tyrann Mathieu, who was on last week. That's a legitimate argument. I understand your point, and certainly probably should have, to be fair. But alas, I chose to roll the way I did. My player 90 was Mike Daniels, who actually does show up on the players list in this episode. So me and the players have him around the same. I actually hazard to think what the Packers' defence would look like if Mike Daniels was not there. He's an incredibly disruptive player. I mean, his game is just power. He's a lot quicker than he looks, but he is very effective at just disrupting anything. Run, pass, plays them both very effectively. Makes guys look bad at times. And really, considering the lack of other impact linemen there at this point in time, they'll of course be hoping Kenny Clark can develop quickly to give him a running buddy there. Yeah, Daniels has been doing it for a while now. Good to see him finally getting some recognition in the players list, as I'll mention later. In terms of that defence, the 3-4, I think he's one of the best in the league. You could put him in a 4-3 though, it wouldn't matter. He's going to be a menace. Can beat guards, can beat tackles, can beat both with just a ball rush. Not the fanciest of pass rushers, but does the business consistently and with, as I say, not too much help from his running buddies there. So he's a great player, thoroughly deserving of a spot on the list. Player number 89 on the players list was Thomas Davis, another player who has not cracked mine. I thought last season was a bit of a down year for him. Him and Kuechly, both, to be honest, they've been the top linebacker tandem in the league for a while. I think last year, generally, the Panthers' defence wasn't great. Started the season particularly slowly. I think we're starting to see a little bit of slowdown with Davis. He's been a great coverage player. I think that's really where he's made his mark. And as an outstanding linebacker, he's always played the run quite well, but a lot of linebackers do. Coverage is, I think, how you truly separate yourself. And I think we saw a bit of a slowdown there last year. Of course, he is getting older. He has had a lot of knee surgeries in his career. We'll see how he comes back. That whole defence, I think, needs to rebound this year. But did not make my list. At 89 on my list, I had Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, who had a great bounce back season in New York. Him and Janoris Jenkins were a really good pair, probably the best pair outside of maybe the guys in Denver in the league. Still got great athleticism, can still run for days. Of course, with his size, he's very difficult if he's in tight coverage. It's hard to get the ball over the top of him. Maybe not the best of tacklers, but this year, just lining up in man on guys, he was incredibly effective. Showed he can still play, still run better than I would have thought after a previous couple of seasons. His was an incredibly savvy signing. As I say, he was a lockdown corner, to be fair. And him and Janoris Jenkins are a huge part, I think, of the Giants turning around that defence this year. Their secondary was, of course, fantastic. A lot of high-level play across the board. On the players list at number 88, Doug Baldwin. That's another one. He's on my list in this episode, so spoiler alert. Ranked him about the same. I wish Wilson could get better pass protection, because then we'd be able to see Doug Baldwin run more routes. A lot of it's short. He's great after the catch. Far more elusive than he looks. Incredibly dangerous player. A lot of fun to watch. Makes circus catches. Just shows a little bit of everything. Don't think I hear enough people talk about him as a number one receiver. And he doesn't look like one, but he certainly plays like one. Clearly has the trust of Wilson. And I think their passing game, if they didn't have him there, would be very sporadic. He is the consistent playmaker and go-to guy in that offense. So good to see. I'll discuss him in a little bit more detail on my list. For me, pick 88, Devonta David of the Buccaneers. Hasn't been quite as dominant in the last couple of seasons. 2-3 years ago, under Shiano in particular, I'd have argued this was, outside of maybe Kuechly, the top linebacker in the NFL. I mean, part of it is the difference in scheme. Not quite as attacking a player as he used to be, and used to blitz a lot more, attack the line of scrimmage a lot more. Still does that very well. And also Quan Alexander is now on the team, and there's another very fast linebacker who gets a lot of those stats off of Devonta. But Devonta's still a very, very intelligent linebacker for the Buccaneers. Makes great tackles for loss. When he reads and sees something, he gets there as quick as anyone in the league. Very dangerous with the ball in his hands. Had a couple of, I think he's got a touchdown each of the last 2 seasons. Is generally a pretty good tackler. Missed a few at the start of the season, which was most unlike him. But yeah, this is a top linebacker. This is not a homer pick by any stretch of the imagination. Trust me, watch this team. Devonta will jump off the film. I mean, the speed of this guy in terms of his ability to get sideline to sideline is incredible. He was putting up ridiculous numbers before Quan Alexander got there. Now Quan's putting them up because, middle linebacker, he's got a bit easier getting to certain bits of the field. But yeah, this is still a top linebacker. Don't let the decline in statistics fool you. Moving on to pick 87, and here's one of the first major issues I got with players list. As I mentioned in the previous video, never enough love for the offensive line in that list, and the fact that Travis Frederick, the Cowboys center, is ranked this low is frankly tragic. This is arguably the top offensive lineman in all of the NFL. He has been superb, considering last year as well. He's probably he's the one making the line calls, and man, he does not get them wrong. Is the top offensive line. I'd argue this is Nick Martin's great, Tyron Smith is great. I think Frederick is the best player on that offensive line. He's just dominant. Can block most guys one-on-one. Can get outside if needed. Massively athletic. Far too low. Again, I will talk about him in more detail. It's going to be a few weeks. Trust me, he's high on my list. Yeah, this is an egregious ranking. Come on, guys. More love for the offensive line, especially how they always say, we know how offensive the O-line is, then show it, guys. Come on, players. Show it in your rankings, because this is frankly the worst one we've come across thus far. My player at 87 is Leonard Williams, the defensive lineman for the Jets. Maybe ranked a little low, I think partly because, the Jets just struggled. But yeah, he had a real breakout season. I thought he was impressive his rookie year. This year we saw why he was being talked about as possibly the top the top talent in that draft. Outshone Wilkerson and Richardson convincingly. Great pass rusher. Teams started to figure out that he was the main threat, started doubling him, was still productive, plays with great speed and power for a guy his size. I think once he's develops a bit more, he could, be having a JJ Watt-like impact on games. It wasn't too far off it at times this year. Splits double teams far more efficiently than a player of his experience should. I mean, this kid's a menace. He is so good on tape. Massive fan of his. I expect to see him fly up these rankings, especially if the Jets can get a better defence around him. He was surrounded by some poor discipline, poor secondary play, poor just about everything, and still found a way to make plays in the backfield on a regular basis. And he's tougher to move than I was expecting him to be at this stage in his career. It's often my worry with some of the 3-4 linemen is once they start getting doubled in the run game, they takes a bit of adjusting to. He's got quite good at attacking it. He's been coached up real well, I've got to say. So yeah, this is a superb player. As I say, I think he'll be one of the risers on this list. Good job, Leonard Williams. You are a boss. Moving on to player number 86 on the players list, Jarrell Casey of the Titans. Finally. I think he maybe been on the list a couple of years ago, but yeah, he's been one of the best linemen in the league. A consistently great lineman for the Titans pretty much since he got there as a third-round pick a few years back. Just a real bowling ball. I was worried when they converted to a 3-4 that may not suit his skill set, because previously they'd been using him as a more of an under tackle in the 4-3. No, it was fine. He made that transition, no problem. Regularly finds a way to get sacks each season, plays the run very well, is far faster than he looks. He's just a little bowling ball. He's got kind of Aaron Donald kind of style to his movement, where it looks a lot quicker than he's a lot quicker than he looks. Plays with superb leverage. One of the advantages of he's being a little bit shorter. Just gets under guys, and he's got great power. One of the better ball rushers in the business these days. Yeah, this guy is an absolute beast, and it is good to see him getting some recognition. He is a fair bit higher on my list, and I'll discuss him a bit more there. My player number 86 is offensive lineman Donald Penn, the tackle for the Oakland Raiders. He had a great season. He's been really good since he got there. Man, the Bucs probably shouldn't have let him go, but they thought he was getting older. Turns out, I actually think it was a good move for him, because in Tampa he did have some weight issues. In Oakland, I think maybe it lit a fire under him, and he's been very, very good for them. I thought last season was his best year in Oakland yet. Him and Assembly were just brutal on defences. As run blockers, they're both huge, very capable, mauling big men. As a pass blocker, he's not the fastest, but he plays with really good technique and finds ways of cutting guys, off at the edge, and provided great protection this year. Is possibly the best run blocking left tackle in the league, and his pass blocking, as I say, is not too shabby either. So he's been very, very good. I hope he makes the players list. Certainly deserves it based on last season. Really good year all round. So good job there, Donald Penn. Number 85 on the players list, Chandler Jones of the Cardinals. I think this one's certainly too low. I think Jones had his best season as a pro. In New England, he'd always played the run very effectively and was a good pass rusher. Last year was his first season. I think he demonstrated that he can be a great pass rusher. Him and Marcus Golden were, both a menace. Golden was very close to making the list, but didn't quite make it. Chandler Jones is much, much higher. He plays, as I said earlier, plays the run superbly. Always has attacks the edge with ferocity, power. Clearly enjoys that part of the game as much as the pass rushing, but this year really stepped up that part of his game. Was used as a more dynamic edge rusher than I suppose he was in New England. Freed him up, and he was just making a living in teams' backfields. Even when he wasn't getting there, the amount of pressures, the amount of run stuffs that you get on his side, just making plays game in, game out. And again, whilst he's not the fanciest of pass rushers, it certainly got the job done this year. He should have been higher up. I'll talk about him a bit more once I get to him on my list. So my 85th ranked player was Michael Bennett, the defensive end, and I guess / defensive tackle. They do move him inside a lot for the Seattle Seahawks. When we're talking about regrets, if you were to ever speak to any of my football playing friends or any of my football knowing friends, they will tell you how aggrieved I was when we let go of Michael Bennett all those years ago, because he was very effective in Tampa and we had a huge need at defensive end. Did not think he'd go to Seattle and become the player that he has. Now, last year, again, dealt with some injuries, missed some games. Otherwise, he'd be higher on this list. I think he's possibly between him and Wagner for who's the best defensive player on that team consistently. I think the secondary guys are all great, but I think it's harder to separate one of them as a unit, although you could maybe make an argument after the injuries last year. But man, Michael Bennett, when he's missing, things change. Averill's a very good player as well, but he's a lot more one-dimensional. Bennett can give them, as I say, they can play him underneath as like a free technique. They haven't got great defensive tackles at this point in time. They've looked to address that the last 2 years. So I think having the option of putting him there really helped. It let them use Bruce Irvin as an edge rusher when he was in town. His versatility and ability to get pressure, regardless of whether it's inside or outside, whether it's through power moves or quickness, he can do both fantastically well. Plays the run well. On that same note, as a one-dimensional lineman, unlikely to make my list. This is definitely not one of them. Yeah, he's an absolute monster, and the only reason he's not higher on the list is because he missed some time. But what a terrible move that was from the Buccaneers. Player number 84. So I've discussed him a little bit earlier. Mike Daniels. I can't critique the players for this one. His ranking's very close to what it was on my list. I said earlier, God knows what that Green Bay D-line would look like without him. Great player. Can't argue too much with him there. We're actually on the same wavelength. Player number 84 on my list. Des Bryant, the wide receiver for the Cowboys. Bryant played well last season. I've got to give him credit as well for being such a good citizen. Of course, he didn't see as many targets as I'm sure he wished he could have. Wasn't used to go vertically too much, which I do think is one of the more dangerous parts of his game. But we got to see a very complete season from him. He's always been a great run blocker because, you put a cornerback up against a dude that big, he's going to maul him, and he did regularly. But it's also I think this year he was a far more reliable target. His hands haven't always been the best. This year he did a pretty good job with that. Ran a lot more short routes. We got to see just how dangerous he is after the catch. He could easily be higher on this list if he was featured more, no doubt. I was toying with not necessarily getting him on because he wasn't featured quite enough in the passing game, but I've decided to put him on simply because everything he did to a pretty high level, and that deserves to make the list, really. Again, this guy's a freak. He's got all the talent in the world. He can be maybe not quite as talented as Julio, but not too far behind. And yeah, I'd expect to see, as Dak Prescott is relied upon to throw the ball downfield more, Dez is going to be featured more heavily. We know with his size, speed combination, his ability to go get the ball in the air, hit him, and between him and Mike Evans, I think for who the most dangerous fade route receiver is, just because their size. As good as Julio is at that, is not quite as physical off the line of scrimmage for a fade route as those two are. Those two do such a good job on that particular play. It's vital to have that. He can give you those slants as well, make tough catches. Is an incredibly physical player. So yeah, Des, mad respect to Des Bryant for the season he put in, and he was a very good citizen while he did it. certainly could have got frustrated at the lack of targets, but team success followed. So good job there. So player 83 on the players list was Calais Campbell, who's left Arizona, is now playing for the Jaguars, a defensive end. This guy has been one of my favourite players in the league for years, as I've mentioned before. I mean, he is absolutely dominant. He's on my list and he's higher than this. I thought last season was one of his best seasons. I think the Cardinals' defence wasn't as good as it's been due to a combination of injuries and I think just some general holes along that roster defensively. But this guy, of course, he's got that size, which makes him a menace in the passing game. Can certainly get those hands up, break those up. But he's just so athletic for his size. Regularly getting into the backfield, making TFLs, sacks, constant pressures. He is an absolute load for teams to move in the run game. I mean, he plays the run as well as any defender in the league. Does a great job of being disciplined in his rush lanes. And I think Arizona, they're going to miss him enormously. He's been a great leader there. As I say, he'll be higher on my list. I'll talk a bit more about him there. My list, player number 63, CJ Mosley, linebacker for the Ravens. I thought last year really stepped it up. Was a big part of the Ravens' defence being as effective as it was. Has felt like a while, since Ray Lewis retired, since they had that great linebacker. I think they've got one there now. He's added some team speed. His defence a few years ago was starting to look older and slower. Still needs, I think, a bit more youth and athleticism, but Mosley, he's added that. Can run, covers really well. No real holes in his game, and whilst I think he could maybe do a little bit better with his shedding blocks, he's a very smart player. It's hard to get your hands on him. He's very slippery in that regard. Just if I could see him attacking blockers a little bit better sometimes, not necessarily trying to avoid them and make the tackle after, then I think he'd fly up the list. It's just something I feel like I saw a couple of times I wasn't too happy with, but he's an ascending player. Very, very good young talent for the Ravens to continue building that defence around. Player number 82 on the players list. Clay Matthews. This is a tough one because Clay has been one of, like most people, I thoroughly enjoyed watching Clay when he was in his prime. However, I feel like some nagging injuries really caught up to him. His play is not what it was, back when they won the Super Bowl, and for those years where he was one of the top defenders in the league. Possibly moving him around the defence, using it inside back. I don't know if that's helped over the grand scheme of things, but this is not the same ferocious pass rusher. Well, I mean, he still plays that way. He's still an incredible high effort player, but I don't know. He doesn't look as explosive or athletic as he used to. Used to just burst off the edge, and you see him bull rushing much larger guys, battling constantly. I just see him lose too much off the edge these days. He did not make my list. Myself at 82, I had a new Raven to go with. The one that I just mentioned, Tony Jefferson. What a season he had last year. He was the shining light of the Cardinals' safeties, considering how good Tyrann Mathieu had been prior. Wouldn't have expected that. He's taking his talents to Baltimore now. This guy was dynamic. I mean, he was everywhere when you watch the tape for the Cardinals. Has great range, played the deep zone really well, didn't get beat often, tackled well, a sure tackler, was just constantly around the ball. You could really see his understanding of his role in the defence, just in how often he was in the right place around the ball, making big plays for a defence that really struggled at times. And it'll be interesting to see how he's used in Baltimore. Him and Weddle could be a superb tandem. His best football is ahead of him, you'd think. And yeah, I mean, heck of a player based on that. Only the 1 year, so I want to see him do it again. But based on the tape from last year, he's good value for that new contract he's got in Baltimore. I'm sure he'll be missed in Arizona. Yeah, he was good. Again, this is one of the players I could see flying up this list if he produces another season of that caliber next year. Final pick from the players list is another one I'm not too happy with. Alex Smith, the Chiefs quarterback. Now, I am more of a defender of Alex Smith than most. I think you can win plenty of games with him. He's definitely shown that in KC. Needs a bit of help around him for sure. He's not going to, Aaron Rodgers a team through a game throwing 40 passes, 4 touchdowns to like 400 yards. That's not his game. But I do think last year, he showed some stuff. Once Tyreek Hill got going, that offense became a little bit more dynamic than we've been used to. But alas, still wasn't effective enough for me to say he was one of the top 100 players in the league. My pick, 81, is Devonta Freeman, the running back for the Atlanta Falcons. Certainly could have been higher up, and I can see why you'd make an argument. My argument here is simply that offense, everything was clicking last year. The offensive line was one of the best units in the league. He had an incredibly dangerous passing game supporting him with Matt Ryan and the cadre of weapons there. Tevin Coleman was incredibly effective. Freeman was great, don't get me wrong. This kid runs hard. He's faster than he looks. He's still a weapon in the receiving game. Maybe not the same weapon Coleman is, but can still contribute in that regard. Runs inside, outside, both very effectively. He's very good at bouncing to the outside when it doesn't necessarily look like it's there. Runs with great vision. Yeah, certainly I could see the arguments being higher, but I've just sort of grayed him down because the overall team success there, I think he had it a little easier than the other running backs. He did a great job, but everything around him was humming for the vast majority of the season. He was, as a result, both him, Coleman, most of the receivers ended up putting great statistical seasons, and of course, when you have the MVP on your team, that also helps. So Freeman, this guy is a lot more effective. I remember him coming out as a Florida State kid. I thought he was a good player. I did not think he'd be this good on the NFL level. Far more powerful than I was expecting him to be. Just generally more athletic than I thought he was at Florida State. So yeah, he rounds out this list. Gonna get the next 10 up tomorrow after top 100 airs tonight. I feel like the offensive linemen are already going to start to dry up, so that'll be something for me to complain about. This week's version list, a few more complaints than last time. So some players I think getting in there on name in Clay Matthews and Alex Smith. Some guys that I think are better players than they're really ever given credit for. In Jarrell Casey, Calais Campbell has regularly been underrated in this list. I was surprised to see Jenkins make it. He was good. He was certainly a consideration for around this point, so I can't critique that one. Thomas Davis, I don't think had a season that warrants being on. Clay Matthews absolutely didn't. So yeah, it's not gotten too bad yet. I'm sure it will get worse. It always does. But let me know, what do you guys think of my list thus far? Any players you suspect won't make it already? Let me know. I'm not going to let you know. I'm not going to tell you unless it's something like absurd that you've suggested. So yeah, let me know what you think of the list so far. Whether you've also got issues with the NFL players list, you can do that below through the comments section. Find us on Facebook at Cover Zero, or find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. I'll do my best to get back in touch with each and every one who does. Love talking football with people. It's always fun. And if you enjoyed it, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff. It'd be greatly appreciated. And check out some more of the videos I did. As I say, players 100 through 91. The rest will be coming up. Done draft reviews for every team. I've got some other stuff coming up, like Cover Who's a series I'm doing, where I highlight a player that most people have kind of forgotten about. They're not quite Hall of Famers, but they were, dominant players in the league who seem to have been, under the radar now. Their careers are over. And I'll also be doing my QB Quandary series this week, featuring the Niners, just going through the options they've got at quarterback. Obviously, they don't have a solution there at the minute. What they can try and do for this year, what they may be looking to do for next year, just going through all that. I think that should be a good one. That should be Thursday. So, yeah, thank you very much for watching. Really do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure as always. Have a great day, and go Bucks.